Hi, so this is the first week of IT system security encryption. This is obviously the unit that is coursework based, so obviously I'm going to be telling you quite a bit of information, and you will need to actually put this in your assignment at some point. I'll probably talk to you all within class anyway as well, but I'm going to basically make one video for this week because there is a bit to cover, but I think it's worth doing it in one video for this because in chunks it probably won't make sense as I go through it. So I'm going to do this as hopefully one material piece anyway. And I'm going to put up another video about using Wireshark, which you should find interesting, hopefully. IT security encryption. So the first pass criteria for this is threat type. So this is not every threat type that I'm going to be going over in this video. It's just any threat type that is not a computer-based network attack for now. So it will be going over the threat types, and you will need to write about all of these at some point. And I'll probably talk to you again on how much you need to write for each as well. But just know that you will be having to cover all these within your assignment. So P1 is obviously explaining the different security threats that can affect IT systems of organisations. P1, P2, and P3 will be in the same document eventually, but what I will get you to do for now is do P1 in a document, P2 in a document, and P3 in a document separately, and then we'll put them all together at the end. And then M1 obviously is a merit which covers all them three sort of areas. So I'm only going to go over part of P1 today. So is going to talk about internal threats, external threats, and some other threats such as physical and social engineering type threats. You'll see what I mean when I get onto that. So internal threats that are deliberate. With internal threats, obviously, a lot of employees that work for an organisation or a company can become disgruntled. Maybe that it's because they're going to be made redundant, maybe because they're not getting paid enough, or simply they don't like the management they work for. They can start going around damaging equipment, or that should say company, not company. I will change that. That shouldn't say that. But essentially, they can damage equipment and damage the company online, so they could post malicious things saying this company is terrible. You should not ever work for these guys, or here is some logon details, like look at what they're doing, or here's their financial situation, like anything like that. Like that is a deliberate internal threat by an employee. Um, Again, they can also sell data to competitors because obviously they will be desperately after stuff like that. It's easier than bribing uh, employees than it is to, actually attack a network. Like attacking a network, sorry, can have a lot of um, different parts to it. It can be really complicated, whereas it can just be easier to be like, right, here's a few £1,000, go and get me this information. Like it's a lot easier for stuff for um, people with malicious intent, such as cyber criminals, to do that. So employees might steal data to actually sell to other people. Um, but yeah, users can also override security controls. So a lot of places will try and override the security just because it makes it easier for them to do their own jobs, or because they just want to do something else completely. So it could be that, say, the guy on the bottom left here wants to play a game, but there's network restrictions in place while he's on his dinner break. He might remove them network restrictions so he can play it, but then that could open it up to problems for the network itself from outside sources. So these kind of things do happen. Like you will need to sort of think, well, realistically, what would happen and why would this happen? And obviously, people are people. They will do things like this because they think, well, it's not going to really affect anything, but obviously it can, so that's why you don't do it. Um, in terms of accidental sort of internal threats, people can delete stuff. I've deleted stuff by mistake before. It can happen. Like I'm sure you guys have deleted a piece of work or something on, oh no, I need to redo it or something like that, but they might delete something really important, like an encrypted file that they need, or a password or something like that, and then they've lost it. Like the company has to try and get this back. Like it depends on what it's been deleted, but this is the thing, like things like this do happen. Um, Unintentional disclosure of data. So again, people whisper to each other that they might say, "Oh yeah, such and such password might be this. I've been struggling to get on. Like, how do you help me?" And even by saying that, they could spread things around and it can get out, or people can be listening in on the conversation. You don't know. So people do make mistakes. People are daft enough to like blurt things out by mistake. Like that can happen. Um, so again, damage to data. They can purely by accident be using something. Say they say something incorrectly, or they shut something down when they shouldn't have done while they were using it. They can damage stuff, and that again can cause network issues, people to get into your network, all sorts of problems like that. Um, so obviously, there's also unsafe practices that come under accidental internal threats, which again can happen all the time. Like networkers have to take this into account. Our network team does, which is why we've got so many restrictions on our network. Um, People can bring in USB drives with malware on. Thing is, it's you may have it on a memory stick you own and you won't know about it. Like people can accidentally bring it in and not know they've got malware on their USB stick, so that could be an issue. Visiting untrusted websites. I imagine some people in here will have visited an untrusted website completely, either by mistake or for other purposes, which could be considered pirating or something like that. I'm not accusing anybody of that. Some people do it. I'm not saying you guys have. I know some people in the past who have, and obviously I don't condone it ever. But that is something that can happen, and obviously you can get malware and all sorts of issues through that. Again, downloading untrusted files can be from an untrusted website. If you download anything you think is dodgy, it could be a virus or something worse. File sharing, again, you will file share between people, especially if you work in the IT industry. You will file share with other members of staff. If it's malware or something bad, again, you're going to spread this virus or spread this worm or spread anything that's potentially malicious. So you got to be careful with things like that. Now, BYOD, we have BYOD at our college, if you remember, so you can log into this through your phone. Now, you've got to be very careful setting one of these systems up because you could potentially bring in something on. Say you bring a personal laptop in and it's got a virus on it or something bad on it. It can spread to the network because you're connecting it to our network through BYOD. So bring your own device and it can infect it. It's it's very important that network administrators think about these things, and you will need to write about this in your report when you're talking about it because you need to basically say like, this is a real threat that can happen, and this is why you've got to think about it. Because if you don't, attackers might actually rely on people doing things by mistake. So you have got to be careful. They will take any opportunity they can. With working with others, now this was something I noticed when I was looking through the revision book. This is quite an interesting tip because you're going to have people who don't know how to use computers or don't know how to relay technical information or anything like that. So with IT problems, like it might be that people come across issues or roadblocks or anything like that, and it can cause issues. Like even miscommunication can cause network problems depending on what the network problem is. But it's just you've got to be aware that if you ever go to a a job where you're IT support or anything like that, people are going to have limited understandings, and it might be really frustrating, but you've got to put up with things like this. It was just interesting that it mentioned it in the book because I think that's really useful. Like, you've got to make sure that if you are working with people who are non-technical, you've got to think, well, they're not idiots, but they might not know about something particular, so you've got to treat them as, well, okay, you might need to explain something in a bit more detail. It would be the same for you guys if you were doing hair and beauty or something. If they were to say, I don't know, thin this hair using a certain method, you'd be like, well, I don't know what that method is. Same for if you're talking to somebody else about computers, they might not know. So it was just interesting anyway. I just saw that and thought that's quite a cool piece of info. Now, for external threats, it doesn't talk too much about computer-based external threats yet, but this is talking about external threats that could be opened up potentially because of what's happening. So obviously, they can come from thousands of different sources. Attacks can come from anywhere. Obviously, they're usually for financial gain, either from individual people or other competitors. So if you've got, say, and I'm not saying this is the truth, but say you've got Amazon and you've got somebody like, say, eBay. I know they're not exactly one to one, but they both sell things on their platform. It could be that eBay might try and attack Amazon to see how they do a certain thing or what their financial status is or something like that. So competitors can attack each other on occasion. Obviously, that's still illegal. Like, they're not supposed to do that. If they get caught, they can be fined heavily and people can be put in prison for it. But it can happen. Again, can be used for political motives and used in warfare. I'm sure you've heard a lot about network attacks from places like China try and attack America, especially like regularly every day. Like they're trying to constantly push against the security in America to try and gain information where they can about anything at all. So even if that's finances or political things or anything like weapons or anything like that, like countries will try and attack each other for that, but they will never admit to it. There are a lot of different things where they will not admit to that because obviously they can be held accountable for it. So usually countries will get attacked, they'll know where it's coming from, but the country will just deny that they're actually doing it and say, oh, it's just a lone attacker or something like that. But they will try and attack each other for that reason. Obviously, there's very little risk for the attacker in most cases because if they can cover the tracks, there's no loss of life. Like they're not in any danger. They're not going into a building or anything. They literally could be sat at home and masking themselves, and you cannot find them. Obviously, if they are tracked, they will be caught and they will be put in prison. It's all dependent on how it runs. Like it's very interesting to sort of see how things have changed and evolved in terms of how people are caught and or mask themselves when they're trying to do illegal things online like this. So it's just something to be aware of that attackers in most cases will not get hurt, and obviously people will not get hurt. It's still a form of terrorism technically. It's just that it's cyber terrorism, so nobody might get hurt, but potentially depending on what you do, like the self-driving cars coming out now. If a hacker was to get into them self-driving cars, they could cause loss of life or injury or something like that. Like that would be considered real terrorism instead of cyber terrorism. So it can leak across into those boundaries. It's just something that you've got to be aware of. Obviously, physical threats can't speak today. Physical threats. So computer equipment can be damaged. So even if it's from internally, like potentially somebody could spill the coffee on it while they're walking. They could spill coffee onto a important piece of networking equipment or computer or something like that and completely damage it. Like it could be malicious, like they could be doing it on purpose to try and slow things down. But obviously outside, people can damage it as well. They could, like an attacker could come in and decide they're going to try and bust up most of the equipment. Um, that could be for financial gain or again just to stop some systems working in particular, because usually security systems work separate to other systems like email and what have you. So if they take one down, it might be easy to get another. Um, Obviously, if theft of computer systems occur, you could get your data from like hard drives and memory sticks. There's a lot of things, and I don't know if anybody remembers, but on BBC News, there's been a few people who've left laptops on the London Underground before, and again, that's a massive data breach. Like that, that is one of the most common ways that networks get broken into because people just are either forgetful or just make mistakes. Like that's what attackers rely on is people making mistakes. If you make a mistake or a network makes a mistake, attackers will jump on it as soon as they can. So stuff like that you've got to be very careful of and make sure that nobody does it. Obviously, you can encrypt those drives so people can't get on them. That will make it more secure because potentially could nick it and then they can't get on it. Obviously, things change where encryptions aren't as good anymore and people can crack it because new technologies come out. But obviously, you want that extra layer of security just in case. You don't want to do that at all. You don't want to uh, not put security encryption on your drives because they could just steal it and then they've got everything. But obviously, you want to give them, you know, that sort of extra security because you don't want them to basically nick it and be like, right, I can get straight onto this and see everything. Natural disasters. I mean, fire, floods, anything like that, they can destroy computer systems. It's all dependent on what happens. Like these things do happen. Um, there are some things out there where computer networks have been damaged literally just due to floods or fires or anything like that. Sometimes, obviously, they can be intentional. Potentially, like a fire, they could be intentional to try and damage something. But 9 times out of 10, if it's a natural disaster, these things can happen. It's just unfortunate. Now, social engineering again is a really interesting one because social engineering is basically manipulating people into giving you data. Now, you will have heard of this before. So phishing, where you either send emails out claiming to be like a multimillionaire or claiming that your account's been stolen or something like that. You click a link and then you fill in your details. They then have your details. So social engineering is basically trying to trick people into giving cybercriminals your details. So phishing is one example. The reason it's called phishing is because they basically put this idea out there going, oh, your login's been compromised. Click this link. Like most people now are obviously aware and go, well, this is phishing. Like this is just a phishing email. I'm not even going to bother. But some people are vulnerable to this, like older generations or people who aren't really tech savvy and think, oh no, my details been stolen. I need to follow this link and do exactly what it says right now. So that's a form of social engineering. And as daft as it sounds, shoulder surfing, literally looking over somebody's shoulder to see what their username and password is a type of attack. Because obviously you're looking at what it is. It could be a PIN number, it could be when you're stood at an ATM machine, could be username and password if somebody's typing it in, like anything like that. Like people don't think of that because it's like, well, I'm on a computer. If you're at work, you would trust people you work with not to look over your shoulder. But if they're a disgruntled employee, like we talked about earlier, they could nick your login details, then potentially use it for bad means. It's very clever how criminals will go to lengths like this in order to do it. Even dumpster diving. Like I was so surprised when I saw this in the spec. So dumpster diving. Obviously, if you chuck stuff away and you think, oh, no one's ever going to look at it because it's in the rubbish. No one will check in the rubbish. People will, if they're that desperate for a really big company to slip up and they just chuck things out, they will sift through it and try and find stuff. Like, I am not joking. It's one of the biggest ways you can lose data, and companies tend to shred a lot of their documents or anything that needs to go in the bin. But depending on how they dispose of it, even shredding might not be good enough. If you get someone who takes literally every single piece of paper home and stitches it back together, which has been known to happen, it can cause again a network threat because they could get something that's like a username or password that's been shredded. You've got to be very careful. Social engineering is specifically designed for people to not think about how they either throw their data away or use their data like in a locale. So when I mean locale, I mean locally to that person, because obviously a lot of threats are based online where you send things through or um, people steal your data by physically hacking and stuff. Social engineering is you giving it them, um, just through being bamboozled by stuff, essentially. Spear phishing, that's the type of phishing where they will attack an organisation. The college was spear fished not long ago, about 2 years ago. They basically sent an email out saying, oh yeah, we've reset everybody's password. You need to click this link, and we all thought it was an actual email. But then our network team went, no, 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 no. That's a phishing email. They just sent it out to everybody. So that is another way of doing it. They can, if they can find out an email that organisations send out, they can basically replicate it and go, right, well, we'll try and see if anybody in the organisation will fall for this, because that is another common way of doing it. It's very, very interesting, this sort of stuff. It depends on who you're targeting, essentially. So, software threats, malware. Everybody's probably heard of malware. I'll be very surprised if you're on a computer course and you've not heard of malware before. Obviously, these are pieces of malicious code, software that's used to attack either specific target or computer directly. These can be through online means, or they can be done via like USB sticks and stuff, as I said earlier. Um, Windows is usually targeted because it's one of the most commonly used softwares, operating systems in the world. I know there's people who use Linux and stuff like that, and obviously there's Android and Apple and stuff like that, but the majority is Windows focused because obviously a lot of systems run off Windows. Obviously there are malware for other things, but malware can obviously come in lots of different formats for a lot of different operating systems, but it depends on the operating system itself. Now, I have on these notes, which I'll give you, I have put types of malware. Now, I'm not going to go over them because there's no point. They're there. You can read them. Like, some of you will have heard of them, some of you won't have. And I'll probably go over it in class if you want me to anyway, but they are there. And I've also got keywords at the end, as usual, just explaining what some of these things are. So, yeah. Um, it's it's an interesting unit. I'm going to make another video where you'll hopefully get to do some interesting network stuff. I'm going to sort of show you how Wireshark works for those of you who haven't used Wireshark. Some of you will have. I'm hoping to do more practical stuff like that hopefully in the future because obviously of what's going on at the minute. But yeah, give me any feedback for this video. If you think it needs to be broken up into chunks, it's just that a lot of this flows into each other. You can't just chunk it. But I hope everybody's okay with this. I will talk to you all when I see you in class. But yeah, please have a look at all this stuff, and I will set other videos as well so you can have a look at those.